mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 3, Episode 4 of Amazon Prime's The Boys, entitled Glorious 5-Year Plan. I don't know why I've gone through my notes multiple times and I continue to forget the name of this episode. But as you can see, even though the video didn't get a ton of plays, it had enough requests of people asked me to cover the show week to week that I decided I would go ahead and do it. The show's exploring a lot of things that I find interesting anyway. It's not all about, blowing motherfuckers up and shit like that. Like I like the fact that the show is touching on deeper topics and finding a funny way to do it at times. It's doing a great job of balancing like gore, humor, but also like real emotion. So like, I thought this was a great episode. I thought this episode did a great job of that. Like, I come to The Boys for certain things, like guaranteed. I expect to see some ridiculous, over-the-top, gory violence. I expect some laughs. I get that coming in. But what keeps me here is the fact that this show does things that I just find interesting. With these superheroes and these statements on power and how people respond to it. So like I want to talk about some of that and what happened in this episode, but I'm gonna break it down by character kind of. But before I start, I do want to point out they even managed to kind of address my complaint from my video for episodes 1 through 3, which at the end of the day, it's a complaint, but like it's an understandable one. When you have such a big cast, you're gonna have trouble finding interesting storylines and compelling storylines for all of these people. You can put them in groups and give that group an interesting story, but just people are just going to end up left out. And I mentioned we didn't see Maeve, I think in episodes 2 and 3 last week. Deep and A-Train continue to get really uninteresting storylines. This is what I was saying last week. And now this week, I think they actually did a good job of finding a way to bring Maeve back in and make her interesting as well with what she's dealing with. A-Train's storyline got a lot more interesting by the end of the episode. Deep is moderately more interesting, but still, I don't know. But still, I like the fact that they found a way to get me invested in some of these characters who they kind of don't give that much attention to. So this episode really brought this season, I don't want to say brought around like it was like the first 3 episodes are bad, but it's putting the show in a direction that I find to be pretty interesting and intriguing, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen. But like I said, I want to talk this episode character by character because there's so much interesting shit that happened to each of them. Not each of them, but to several of them that I think they did a great job in this episode in packing in a tremendous amount of like character development and plot movement in just an hour. That I just wanted to break it down that way. So I'm going to keep over here with my notes, and I'm going to start with Homelander because he's kind of like he's like the sun in this show's universe. And I think that before you probably could make the argument that was Butcher, but everything is revolving around Homelander this season. It's all about how do we stop this guy? And it's even become that way for the soup. So that's where I want to start because he's clearly the sun in this universe here. And there's 2 factions of people who want him dead. The Boys, we all know they've been wanting Homelander dead. Nothing new there. They just feel emboldened by the fact that they might be able to get a weapon that can actually do it. But the more interesting side too is that now there's Soups involved. We see now just how serious Maeve is about this. I liked her saying like, maybe I can buy Butcher a few seconds to get a good shot off, and at worst I can get a few licks in myself. Like she's dealing with a lot of guilt over her involvement in everything that he's done. And she's kind of become self-destructive, kind of like how people are almost kind of like punished themselves for wrongdoings in the past. This is like half stop Homelander, half punish herself for helping to create him. And I think that's something, like I said at the top of the video, that they're giving Maeve something interesting. That's interesting to me. I like to see that that person who's so torn apart by guilt over aiding and creating a monster, that killing that monster it's just as much about possibly like, okay, if I die here, this is what I deserve. Which I think she basically says that. So it's like, it's part being reckless and putting yourself in danger as a way to essentially potentially punish yourself, it's just as much that as it is killing Homelander. So I thought that was pretty cool too. Starlight obviously is one of the Supes that is totally in on killing Homelander, and then she tries to loop in her ex Supersonic, who agrees rather easily to be in on this plot. And they do try to recruit A-Train as well, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the show is kind of building Homelander into this Donald Trump type character, and politics aside, I'm not talking about, I'm not trying to make, I don't want anybody hopping in the fucking comments telling me about some fucking, I don't want to fucking hear it. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about the fact that he went on that Fox News type show. He's talking about conspiracies and the mainstream media. Like they are very clearly trying to connect these two people being Homelander and Donald Trump in our minds. And I think that's to actually help, because I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people voted for Donald Trump, but at the same time, a lot of people hate him. So if you want to build up even more disdain for Homelander, turning him into someone that people are going to associate with Trump, I think actually helps with the audience in that regard as well. If you weren't already sold on how shitty he is, that might help you. And then also too, I think this fan base is probably more in favor of hating Homelander because of how he might be like Donald Trump than somebody who is sitting there like, I can't believe they're trying to make this piece of shit into Donald Trump. Like, I think there's probably more the first person there is the second one, but still very clear. He's amassing power. Victoria Newman, she's supposed to be reading this statement on Homelander on behalf of Stan Edgar, basically just let them know, like, Stan Edgar's like, we gotta let him know who's in charge, we gotta put him in place, he's getting out of control, but basically kind of like giving him like a slap on the wrist almost. But then she goes up and she reads a statement about Edgar, saying that Homelander has provided evidence of all of these crimes that he's committed. And I love how they did this reveal, right? We're sitting there watching, all the Supes are sitting there watching, everyone's like, okay, what's she gonna say? And she says what she says, and I'm sitting there like, okay, he must have gotten to her somehow. What did he do? So then later we see Homelander in her apartment, and no, it was an apartment or a condo, whatever. But it doesn't fucking matter what kind of house it is. In her place, he shows up there. They have a conversation, but essentially at the end of it, he gives her this black velvet bag. She cuts him off like, do you have it or not? And he's like, yep, just as I promised, gives it to her, flies off. We later find out that essentially what he did was, and like I said, I like the order of the reveal. It's like in the moment of the press conference, we're like, how did this happen? What did he do? We see them talk, and at the end of it, we're still like, how did this happen? What did he do? And then later we find out that essentially, in order to help protect her daughter, she did this in exchange for Homelander giving her Compound V, which leads into an incredible scene. And this is what I'm talking about when I say this is why I stay here for this show. I get my head explosions. I get motherfuckers impaled with dildos. I get to see that shit. I get the laugh, which I'm going to talk about at the end when I talk about some of my favorite moments of this episode, some of the funny lines. But moments like this, the scene with Newman and her daughter, what a great fucking scene. What a powerful scene. The idea of like a parent wanting to protect their child, but in this world, that could for her entail, I gotta make her a superhero too, so that way she's not vulnerable like everyone else. Vulnerable to somebody like Homelander, who's steadily amassing power and looking more and more corrupt and on the edge. And her Newman crying like just silent tears while her daughter is hugging her, screaming in pain. What a great scene. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps me here. Like I love seeing, a show that's looked at for being like, oh, it's so violent, it's really cool. Look at Homelander doing all this shit. And like, that's cool. But like, I like how they do things like this too. That was an incredibly powerful scene, especially if you're a parent. Like, but I don't even think you have to be a parent to understand or to feel something in that scene. Because that was a great fucking scene, man. Butcher and Frenchie, they meet with Nina. They go to pay off the, what's her name? Sherry. They pay off Sherry's debts. Plus $100K, which I thought was funny, where the woman's like, well, what about my pain and what about my stress and my sorrow? And I'm like, he gave you an extra $100K. Like, that should cover it. But she's angling because she wants Sherry herself, and we don't see it, but essentially Butcher kicks Frenchie out of the room, and we find out later that they essentially decided, rather than give up Sherry, they're going to do a mission in Russia for her real quick, knocking out this Russian oligarch. So she makes that agreement to allow them to do it that way. And after they pull that off, she will give them the location of the lab that has the, what's the weapon called? BCL Red, which is the weapon that they think can kill Homelander. But I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. Well, I don't know. Should I talk about it now? No, I'll come back to it later. So moving on to Huey. Huey's another one I think is really interesting in this episode too. Like, this is a guy dealing with some serious self-esteem issues that almost kind of border on misogyny a little bit. And I say that because his issue isn't I'm too weak. His issue is that my female partner is stronger than me. And that the fact that it's a girl is what's bothering him. It's not the fact that it's someone else who always has to save him. Like, oh, I'm such a damsel in distress, and I'm always getting saved by someone else. If it was always Butcher that was saving him, he wouldn't give a fuck. It's the fact that it's his girl that's what's bothering him. That's a different kind of fragile masculinity right there. But like, it seems like he essentially feels like less of a man by having his woman save him. And that to me, when we talk about fragile masculinity, it doesn't get more fragile than that, because you have, like, if your girl was like a regular person and she was like a 115 pound little, I don't know how tall Starlight is, but 5'2", little tiny girl, whatever, and she's always kicking ass on your behalf, then maybe you like, yeah, okay, if she's regular, but like, she's a fucking superhero, of course she's always saving you. Like, but like, again, like that insecurity that men mask as masculinity is so transparent in Huey. Like, it's not about I need to be more of a man. It's the fact that he feels like less of a man because his woman is saving him, even though his woman is a superhero, and that drives him to take the Temp V. And when you're someone who's struggling with who you are, you can't gain power in order to fill a void. Because that's going to corrupt you. Like they say, like the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what I think is happening with Huey. It's like he's high on power. Like when we see him like looking at his arm while they're driving out the window, he's like smiling. He looks overjoyed. Kimiko's fucking dying in the back, and he's grinning at his arm because he is so drunk on power. And that's why, like, people like that can't have power. Like, I've always hypothesized that a lot of that is why people get into law enforcement. Like, yes, of course there's people who want to get into law enforcement because they want to protect, they want to help people, they want to solve crimes, all that kind of shit. But a lot of these people get into law enforcement to fill that void of, I need to be lording my power over someone else like it was done to me, like they got picked on in school or something. So now they give themselves power via law enforcement, and now they can pick on people. And now they can lord their power over others. And I feel like that's the kind of flaw that Huey has. When you're trying to get power so you can like get revenge or just put someone else beneath you because you've been on the bottom rung, that's always going to corrupt you. And I feel like that's what's happening with Huey. He's not doing this for the right reasons. And we see it in the team, but I'll talk about that in a moment as well. Everybody's disappointed in him. They'd expect this from Butcher, but not him. I think that's interesting as well. But and someone else who's trying to fill a void is A-Train. He feels useless. He can't use his powers. He wants to go after this Blue Hawk superhero who like is like a superhero episode of We Own This City. I don't know if you guys have watched We Own This City, but he's like a superhero Wayne Jenkins walking around over policing black neighborhoods, and he wants to do something about it. And we see Deep's wife tell him, she continues to give him great advice, even though it might not be what he wants to do. It's always the right thing to do. She essentially tells him what to say, and he, again, in a thing that I think has helped to tie for us to mentally tie Homelander to Donald Trump. Deep says, you can't afford to look soft on crime. He's like, that's right, I can't. And I think that was a good scene too. It shows Deep as pretty much a spineless puppet. And then it also continues to align Homelander and Donald Trump in a way that I think is meant to meant to really help us hate him even more. But rather than doing the right thing and teaming up with everybody else, A-Train, again, trying to fill that void of I want to be useful, I want to feel needed, I want to feel wanted. Rather than teaming up with everyone else to destroy Homelander, he decides to give up the plan and do that to get in Homelander's good graces, which is pitiful given everything that had preceded it. But that's what happens when you're such a broken man because of one other person. Like if A-Train was just having a rough go of it, he might not have done that. But Homelander has emasculated him. Like, even look at when A-Train and Deep got into that fight. Subtle things. They're both laid on the ground in pain. Homelander helps up Deep and then basically tells A-Train to fuck off. Like, it's interesting to see how people respond to something like that. Someone else might lash out. Everyone else seems to be lashing out. Maeve is lashing out, obviously not outwardly, building up toward a lash out. Starlight is doing the same. When it happens to A-Train, he starts to look like he's going to join everyone else in the lash out plan, but he sees it best to curry favor. And it's always, I like looking at how people respond to those sorts of situations. We want to judge A-Train, and I think we're meant to, but then you have to look at yourself. What would you have done in that situation? Would you secretly join up on a mission that could end up with you dead? Or do you align yourself with the most powerful being in the universe? So it's an interesting conversation to have. But again, that's why I'm here. That's why I like this show. It brings that kind of shit up to light to talk about. And then lastly, the team. Like I said, I said I was going to talk about the team later. Obviously, they're disappointed in Huey. They would expect that from Butcher, but not from him. The team's falling apart. They both seem to be, being Huey and Butcher, both seem to be hooked on V. I wonder if it has an addictive quality that is very literal for Butcher, and that he's not actually like drunk on power. He is somebody who is literally addicted to it now that he's done it twice. Huey is very clearly drunk on power. Like, it's just, Huey's just on some next level shit. Like, he's just like, yeah, I just love this. I've been weak and bullied. Even on this team, he's been weak and bullied. So yeah, it's gonna corrupt Huey for sure. Frenchie and Kimiko want out, and they're like planning on finishing this job. They're gonna, do this one last thing, and they're gonna go to Marseille. Everything's gonna be great. And I put in my notes when I was writing, I'm like, one of them gonna die, because that's how it always happens. You get the cop like, oh, I'm 1 day from retirement, and then he gets killed on the job. that's this. Like, one more job, and then we're gonna run off into the sunset. No, you're not. And that's what ends up happening after Butcher and Huey kill off all these Russians when they finally arrive at this lab to get this weapon. They open up this door, and it turns out Soulja Boy is alive in there, and he kills. Well, I can't say he kills her. He blasts Kimiko with something, some energy from his body, and she doesn't heal. So don't know what's going to happen there. Mother's Milk is fed up with the whole situation. Another good moment. Him and Butcher had a nice scene where Butcher talked about why he brought Mother's Milk onto the team, and it wasn't because of all of the accolades or like running off his stats. It was because he's a guy that keeps a team together. And they do it. That was a nice scene. And then they call back to that with Mother Milk saying, like, there is no team for me to keep together anymore. And you look, and you got Huey out the window with his fucking glowing arm. Like, yes, this is the greatest shit ever. You got Butcher just being a dick to everybody, being a dick to Ryan, being a dick to Kimiko. You got Kimiko hanging on by a thread. Frenchie doesn't like the way any of this has happened so far. So Mother's Milk is just like, yeah, you fucked the team up. You did this, and you brought us all back just to fuck it up again. So really great stuff this week. This show's doing a lot of really great work. So before I wrap up, I want to talk about a couple of things few things that I like, because I don't want to just only talk about, hey, here's what happened, and here's a different aspect to it. I want to talk about like the funny stuff too, the violent stuff, all the stuff that we walk in the door for. All the extra shit is what keeps me here. I'm gonna keep saying this every episode. The gore and the violence and the humor is what brings me through the door, and the other shit is what keeps me inside. But Homelander, I love when this wasn't a funny scene, but I thought it was a great scene when Homelander is kind of like taunting Huey after the whole thing about #homelight, which I love that hashtag. After that, he's like, yeah, this is just for appearances or whatever. Be like, but how good is she? Is she a good fuck? And they both look enraged. And I loved how angry they look. And I love the idea of being a man who Huey is bigger than Anthony Starr. Like, so it's like when that moment when he kind of like walks up on him, it's like, yeah, you're bigger than him, but he like one eye blast and you're done. You're so angry and you can't do shit. And Starlight got powers and is so angry and can't do shit. But I loved watching them just like boil with rage, but know that they can't do anything. I love when people do that, when they want to get angry with Homelander and they have to check themselves. Is your idiot brain being fucked by stupid? I don't think this is a good line, by the way. It's kind of dumb. But I like how Ashley uses it later. So Homelander says it to her and very just like, okay, go find out what's going on with this other shit. Very insulting for someone who's constantly been there for him. And then she says it to someone else, this guy who wrote this script. And I love that concept too. The idea of like hurt people or like shit rolling downhill. You see it in corporate America. Like if the people at the top come down on the people who are below them. Now those people come down on the people below them and so on and so forth. And that's what we see here. She sees somebody that she can come down on. So that lets her know, that lets her feel like she's not at the bottom. She's not the bottom one because there's always somebody else that she can shit on too. And I like that concept as well because, like, I mean, we've seen it play out in this episode. So I thought that was a good scene too. And then she breaks out this massive Homelander-styled strap-on. That was funny too. Obviously, the Kimiko's dildo fight scene I think was cool. The 7 themed dildos, and I mean they're themed about the 7. Not there are 7 themed dildos. You know what I'm talking about. The one going through the Russian oligarch's head from the back, the Black Noir one, so it's like a big giant black dick comes through his head. Having the fight scene where she's beating people up with dildos, which I just watched something like, if you see Everything Everywhere All at Once, wild fucking movie. They have a dildo fight scene too. That was not on my bingo card for 2022. Seeing 2 dildo fight scenes. Didn't expect it. I also liked her getting out of the van all sexy in her little dress, and then she can't walk in heels, and like Belle Biv DeVoe Poison is playing. I thought that was cute. I like the hamster that burrows into that guy's head through his eye. That was fucking sick. I loved when Edgar when Edgar met with Homelander. That was a great conversation. And they're both kind of like, it's like a big dick measuring contest. Like, here's how great I am and how you can't do anything about it. And Stan Edgar, I keep wanting to call him Gus, by the way. He's been Gus Fring for like the past, I don't know. But he's like, he knows how to hurt Homelander. The whole thing, like, I don't respect you. And then he ends it with, you're not a god, you're a bad product. Woo! See, like, Homelander has the tactical advantage, obviously. He made all the right plays. But that's gonna fucking sting, man. I love that line. It's a great line, but it's also one that he knows is gonna hurt Homelander because that's his weakness. Homelander's weakness is who he is. Like, having all these powers, but not being loved or respected or he likes feared, but I think he wants to be loved and respected. So to have someone say, like, you're just basically like a defunct toy or something like that, like, that's gotta hurt. And lastly, I loved Mother Milk shouting like random Russian themed movies at people as he killed them, like Red Dawn, motherfucker. Rocky 4, motherfucker. Like, if you haven't seen those movies, it's not funny, but yeah, I thought that was cool. So I'm gonna wrap this one up. Like I said, great episode. I'm not gonna repeat myself anymore about what got me in the door and what's keeping me here, but that's the level of respect that I have for this show, and that's what I want to bring to talking about it every week. So I will see you guys next week for episode 5, and until then, peace.